On top of this, suppose tomorrow there's going to be an infrastructure project which is going to come up and they want to raise funds. Okay, typically right now, the way in which you raise funds is to go to the market, raise equity capital, raise funds, or you can raise basically you can issue a fixed income security like a bond, and then you can raise funds. But then if regulation permits in India as well as in abroad, you already have got a lot of projects, infrastructure projects, which are actually raising funds through crowdfunding, as well as they also raise funds by issuing blockchain coins or utility tokens, so to speak. You call these as utility tokens. So what are utility tokens? Utility tokens are nothing but basically a contract, a smart contract or a software program, which is written on top of the blockchain coin, which will ensure that you give some conditions. Say basically, for example, this particular utility token is associated with this particular infrastructure project, say a real estate project. So this particular token is specifically meant to be traded only for that particular business, so to speak. So that particular utility token will be quoted in the market. It will be actually, you'll be having an exchange rate, currency exchange rate with the dollar as well as with Bitcoins, with Ripple, with Ethereum. All these are like blockchain coins and tokens. So you'll have a exchange rate available, and you know very well the cryptocurrency market is actually open for on a 24/7 basis. So you got actually in fact some of the equity traders and commodity traders on Saturday, Sunday, they don't have the markets open internationally, so they come out to the cryptocurrency markets and then they keep trading. So this is the way in which you have a lot of utility in terms of going ahead and taking up positions in the cryptocurrency markets, and to a great extent it will actually benefit institutional investors as well as the retail investors. So when I'm talking of investments, please note, you always have to diversify your portfolio risk. What do you mean by diversifying your portfolio risk? All of you might have heard of the Sharpe ratio. What is Sharpe ratio? Can somebody tell me what is Sharpe ratio? Okay, it is risk-adjusted returns. Like for example, you have actually a portfolio of investments. You might have, say, maybe around 50% in equities, another 30% in fixed income securities, and you might have another, basically, say, 10% in bullion. So it is required for you to actually diversify your portfolio risk. You might wonder basically what the other 10% you might want to invest in. So you can actually diversify it across other assets like alternative assets. So blockchain and cryptocurrencies are actually considered as alternative assets. What are alternative assets? Basically, like, okay, fine, they are actually assets which actually provide you a hedge against your typical investments like equities and bonds and fixed income securities. Internationally, you have a lot of corporate diversifying their corporate treasury. Basically every corporate has got reserves. So all these reserves are actually like, invested, a portion of it. Corporates have started investing after taking the required board approvals as well as within their articles of association and MOA. It is possible for them to actually diversify maybe even 2% or 3% of their reserves in cryptocurrencies. Why? Because it actually increases the Sharpe ratio to a great extent. Please note, cryptocurrency is extremely volatile, but then the returns can be actually like, of course, nothing is guaranteed in the markets. Nobody can guarantee any returns. But the point is like cryptocurrencies in the last 10 years has actually increased manifold. It's actually increased by more than 1000%, and Bitcoin, it's actually increased all the way from even as low as $100 or $1,000 all the way to $66,000 or $70,000 or thereabouts recently. But then it's been very volatile. Before around 3-4 years, it went up to $20,000, fell to $3,000, and those who are actually already tracking the markets, you must be knowing it, once again increased to $66,000, fell to $32,000. So every day you can see actually a huge volatility of 10% or 15% or anywhere around that in many of the cryptocurrencies. So you've got to be very, very careful. So if you're investing, please take advice from your financial advisors. But then internationally, you have a lot of corporate, a lot of financial institutions. Even Goldman Sachs set up its own desk for investing in cryptocurrencies. So JP Morgan has set up a dedicated desk whereby it's helping its clients to invest in cryptocurrencies. So you have a lot of these multinational banks, international institutions encouraging their clients to actually diversify their portfolio risk. So this is one of the benefits of blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies, so to speak, as an investment opportunity. So let us look at what exactly goes into making of the blockchain technology. The blockchain technology, so to speak, it requires verifiability as far as data is concerned. As I told you just a while back, you need to verify the data thoroughly. It's required for you to keep track of the genuineness of the data. So I already told you that the data is actually encrypted and it is stored in a distributed ledger format. So the distributed ledger format is actually nothing but basically, you've got thousands of computers which act in sync through what is called a consensus algorithm. This consensus algorithm is nothing but a cryptography algorithm which is used to encrypt the data and decrypt the data. You call it typically what is called a hash function. So in Bitcoin, I give the example, it's called SHA-256. That is actually the cryptocurrency algorithm which is there, the cryptography algorithm which is used for masking the data. Like for example, if you've got say a 1 GB data, okay, that entire 1 GB data has got a lot of zeros and ones, right? It's nothing but basically zeros and ones which make up the data. Now the zeros and ones through a series of operations, bitwise operations, you got basically an AND operation, OR operations, XOR as well as NOT function is there. So you can actually perform multiple operations and subsequently this entire data is actually compressed in just 256 bits. That is the beauty of this SHA-256 algorithm, for example, a consensus algorithm which actually the hash function which actually compresses this data in just 256 bits. So that 1 GB data, every time you do this operation, it actually compresses it into just 256 bits. And just imagine what is the amount of computing power which is required for you to actually compress such a big data in order to compress it into just 256 bits. So in this context, you have actually what you call an avalanche effect. What do you mean by avalanche effect? Even if out of these 256 bits or 32 bytes of data, even if 1 0 or a 1 is added or basically it's removed or changed, you will have a significant impact subsequently when you're actually decrypting the data. So using the same SHA-256 consensus algorithm, if you actually decrypt the data, what would happen is that it would actually give you a substantially different result as compared to what you actually encrypted in the first place. So in other words, what you have is actually a system which will ensure the genuineness of the data, and the best part is it is not one of the nodes out of 80,000 nodes which have to actually give the correct result. It is at least 51% of the total nodes which have to actually give validation as far as that particular 256 bits is concerned. In other words, 51% of the nodes have to agree that basically this particular transaction is genuine, this data integrity is there. What is data integrity? Data integrity basically ensures that this particular data is actually a valid, the transaction has actually happened. So you have actually a system whereby a blockchain is created, a series of ledgers basically is created in terms of basically ensuring that the data actually, each and every transaction, each and every ledger actually points to the previous ledger, each and every block of data actually points to the previous block in order to ensure continuity as far as the data is concerned. So you got data integrity, you have actually a consensus algorithm which whereby 51% of the nodes have to agree as far as the entire data is concerned. So the mechanics of it we'll see subsequently, how exactly it can happen. So typically you got financial sector challenges in the typically in the existing scenario. Like for example, you got banks which charge you transaction fees. So this blockchain technology, because it's a peer-to-peer connectivity, it actually eliminates the charges to a great extent. Why? Because you do not have any intermediary in between the sender of funds as well as the receiver of funds, for example. So you have actually a lot of other advantages related to the blockchain technology, which will ensure that you can actually eliminate intermediaries or counterparties in between from basically increasing the cost of transactions. So we have a system whereby it is possible for you to actually decrease the cost to a great extent, and it can also enable you to have a cross-border payments system without any particular delay. For example, if you're going to send funds or receive funds, there might be a delay in your typical transactions. You'll also have to incur exchange currency fluctuations. Like for example, if you want to send euro from France to say basically like you want to send dollars to US. So you will have to convert the euro into US dollars based on the existing exchange rate. But then euro as well as the US dollar are major currencies. You must be knowing what are major currencies, right? So basically, but then if you want to send rupees from India to Europe, you want to convert into euros, it is required for you to convert the rupees, Indian rupees, into US dollars first. And then the US dollars have to be converted into euros. So you, in other words, you got actually an exchange rate impact in terms of the forex rate, the bid-ask spread, which you have. These are transaction fees. So instead of that, in case you have, if the government permits you to actually send a cryptocurrency coin or a token to another part of the world where it is accepted, you just have to transfer it from your wallet into the receiver's wallet. So you actually have got basically a system whereby it becomes very easy for you to transfer funds. Cross-border payments are possible and it is seamless. You will not be incurring any transaction charges. So these are some of the benefits of cross-border payments using cryptocurrencies. But then other than that, it is possible for you to also use cryptocurrencies for your business applications. We'll see subsequently. So you do not have any particular legacy cost, so to speak. I mean, in terms of basically like what exactly goes into the mechanics of the transfer of funds or the exchange of goods. So it's easy for you to actually ensure that you minimize the cost to a great extent. Now, just coming to the last concept, I know the entire entire session has actually been quite heavy, but then I'll just touch base on just one last concept over here. So in blockchains, you have actually what you call a public blockchain like a Bitcoin. You also have got what is called a permissioned blockchain, whereby you have the blockchain only within a specific set of entities, like a corporate and its customers. So you have entire supply chain management, and the payments and everything basically happens only within this closed network. Suppose Maruti, for example, and all its suppliers, instead of actually using rupees, basically through banks for transfer of funds and everything, they've got their own, basically, their own Maruti coin or a token. It is possible for them to actually transact more easily. The token can be listed on the exchange also. So it's possible for them to actually, exchange, make payments as well as receive payments using this particular token or cryptocurrency. So you got actually a closed kind of a permission kind of network. So you got different types of blockchains as well as cryptocurrencies. We have already seen what is called consensus algorithm. The last concept which we'll be touch basing on is the number of bitcoins. For example, Bitcoin is a public blockchain, as I told you. The number of bitcoins which are there in the market is actually going to be finite. Why am I calling it finite, and how is it different from typically a fiat currency like say US dollars? US dollars, if the US central bank, US Federal Reserve wants to print currencies, they can actually print as much dollars as they want, right? Depending on their internal approvals, depending on basically increasing the balance sheets and so on. But the most important thing is over here, you have actually a system whereby it is possible for, like bitcoins, basically like you do not have an unlimited supply of bitcoins. So how are bitcoins created? You have actually a mechanism called mining of bitcoins. This mining of bitcoins is nothing but a series of algorithms which have to be, you got to solve a problem using cryptography. There are specific mining algorithms for that. Once you actually solve a hash function or basically the consensus algorithm, once you actually solve it, you'll be allotted a portion of bitcoins as basically, the cost of effort for basically solving that particular consensus algorithm, you get paid amount of bitcoin. So that is how actually the bitcoins are actually created. So the maximum number of bitcoins which can come into existence based on basically whatever protocol is there as of now is around 21 million bitcoins. So you have actually a finite amount of bitcoins which will be available in the market. But then on the other hand, when you compare it with a fiat currency, it's possible for you to actually print as much currency as possible. So in other words, you have actually a static amount of supply which is going to be there, but then the demand is increasing. That's why you have actually the price of bitcoins also increasing. So we'll go through some of the finer aspects of bitcoins as well as the other cryptocurrencies and the economics of trading, the cryptonomics of trading on bitcoins, as well as how exactly cryptocurrencies can be used as investments in the forthcoming sessions. So thank you very much for a patient listening. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to take it up. In blockchain can actually be used by corporate for their own internal requirements, as well as basically like, for investment purposes, and you have actually a lot of cross-border payments which are actually made using cryptocurrencies. So typically you can actually see blockchains as well as blockchain technology being used by the financial sector for safety and security of their transaction data. Like for example, it is possible for banks to have their all the transaction history of their customers through a dedicated blockchain, which will ensure that all the data is actually encrypted and it is there within their system itself. One more additional invention which has actually happened to a great extent. In fact, there are three central banks which have already issued what is called a central bank digital currency. So it's a good thing you actually touch based on basically the applications of blockchain, other applications of blockchain. Central banks, more recently, they've actually seen the application of this blockchain technology for issuing what is called a CBDC, that is a central bank digital currency. Now, what is a central bank digital currency? The central bank digital currency is nothing but basically a blockchain which is developed by a central bank, okay, using a technology provider. It can be either in-house or they might get into a vendor to basically develop the blockchain technology. But the blockchain technology will be proprietary to the central bank, and the central bank will have complete control over this particular blockchain. So what is the use of this? For example, suppose the Indian government, our Reserve Bank of India comes out with a blockchain, okay, and they issue what you call the Indian CBDC, that is central bank digital currency denominated in rupees. So it is possible for example, there is a farmer who's due for any kind of, basically like any kind of financial, for the purpose of financial inclusion. Suppose you have actually, the government wants to issue basically the CBDC in rupees to basically even the grassroots level of the society. They want to help them out because in times of distress, like for example, during COVID, public distribution system had to actually issue basically like, free grains as well as rice and everything. So, but then basically if they want to issue funds, there is always the Jan Dhan accounts was open. But the thing is, it still did not reach the percolate down to the grassroots level of the society. So just imagine if the government immediately issues this rupees as a central bank digital currency through the Reserve Bank of India system, it is possible for you to actually reach out to the grassroots level of the society. So this central bank digital currency is going to be a very good application whereby central banks can have better control over their monetary policy. It can even be linked to interest rates. And the specific interest rates actually like, it will actually be developing itself into the yield curve structure. I'm not going to go more into detail, but then there is actually a very good scope for development of blockchain technology for issuing the central bank digital currencies, which is going to remarkably change the landscape of the way in which you make payments. China has essentially like done a lot of pilot projects, and you have various other countries which have actually launched the CBDC. Yeah, the hash function is basically a function which helps you to solve cryptography using cryptography. Like for example, there's an algorithm called SHA-256, as I had mentioned to you. It is possible for you to actually like encrypt the data and decrypt the data. So that is typically what a hash function is all about. So I explained to you about that Byzantine problem. In fact, that Byzantine problem was actually there for several decades and centuries. How exactly will all the generals come to a consensus in order to attack Byzantium? So it was in fact the Bitcoin blockchain which actually solved this particular problem, whereby there could be a consensus among all the nodes. So a majority of the nodes have to agree. So this particular encryption of data and decryption of data is done using the hash function, and this particular function will enable basically at least a majority, at least 51% of the nodes have to accept that this particular transaction is valid. That is why in fact right now, if you do a Bitcoin transaction, it takes as high as 20 minutes for the transaction to be validated, because so much of power, there's a lot of huge power consumption in terms of basically Bitcoin mining and to validate the transactions. So I've just explained to you very briefly, but then we'll go through it in detail subsequently.